Hello and welcome to Kids Story Time. Our story today is about the Tower of Babel. The story can be found in Genesis chapter 11. It's a very small story that maybe a lot of children know. And once again, we intend to learn something relevant and useful for us in our time today from this story in the Tower of Babel. So we're going to go ahead and watch a short video about the story. And once we're done with the video, we're going to come back and look at some questions and probably discuss some answers. So let's take a look at the video first and then come back to the questions.
After the flood, more people were born. The people slowly journeyed together and found a wide, beautiful plain to settle in the land of Babylonia. They started making houses, raising families, growing crops, and establishing their new life together. As they did, they got an idea. Let's build ourselves a big city and a huge tower that will reach up to heaven. This, they thought, would make them famous and would prevent them from being scattered all over the earth. The tower slowly went up, brick by brick. The people were discovering the power of working together, building together, and soon relied so much on their own strength that they forgot about God. The people felt unstoppable. They would dominate. Their power, together, grew stronger and stronger. They were building a mighty city. God saw the people's aggressive urge to be independent. God knew that it would only lead to sin. In His wisdom, He devised a plan to scatter the people so they would populate the entire earth. He began to confuse their language. Now, when one man said to another, "Hand me the hammer," he wouldn't understand. They couldn't do anything together if they did not speak the same language. And that was how their great plan ended. Everyone was speaking in a different language. Those speaking the same language grouped together and were dispersed throughout the earth. That is how the earth became populated with different races, nations, and languages.
All right. Our very first question is, why did the people decide to build a tower in the first place itself? Why did they want to build a tower that was so tall, that reached up into the skies? Why did they want to do it? So go ahead, pause the video, think about the answer, and what would you think is the right answer to this? And go ahead with your answers, and once you're done, you can come back and join the video. All right. Now the answer to this is quite simple. It was there in the passage and also in the video that we saw. When the people, became many and they started to gather together, like we saw in our earlier story, God saved Noah and his family from the flood. And then after Noah came out of the flood, his children began to have their children. They had more children, grandchildren, and descendants started to spread out. And it came to a point where the people all kind of wanted to, be together, gather together, and build a city. And in that city, they wanted to build a very tall tower that reached out into the skies. And they wanted to do that so it could be something that they could claim for themselves and make a name for themselves and establish themselves as people who are powerful, people who are mighty, people who had the ability to do anything that they could do or anything that they had put their mind to, they were able to do that. So they wanted to make a name for themselves. That's the most important thing that we need to remember. Anytime we're tempted to have a name for ourselves or make ourselves proud or make others feel as if, we're bigger than them or we're more important than them, this story is something that we can all be, reminded of. When we're tempted to have a name for ourselves, that's one of the earliest things that we need to watch out for. in that area of being careful to not be proud about ourselves. So that's kind of why they wanted to build the tower. They wanted to have a name for themselves and be proud about it. Here's our second question. It's probably straightforward from the story that we saw. So the question is, what did God do to stop them building this tower? We know that God wasn't happy about this. So what did he do to kind of stop them from finishing and completing this tower? So go ahead, pause the video, think about the answer and discuss. And then once you're done, you can come back and join the video. Right, so like we heard in the story, what God did was very, very interesting. He confused the people's language. And once he did that, they could no longer understand each other. And, like you probably know from the story, up until this point, everyone in the world, they were descendants from one family. And they all spoke the same language. They all understood each other so precisely. And that was, I think, what gave them that confidence in themselves that they could do anything they wanted to do because they were so good at communicating, so good at coordinating and doing whatever they wanted to do together. And that very same thing which they thought was their greatest strength, God now confused it totally so that they could no longer understand what each other were saying. They got confused, they didn't understand what the other person was saying, and it became so hard to understand and communicate to one another. And as a result of this, these people who had started building a mega project were now in the middle of it and couldn't proceed because they didn't know what to tell to the other person wouldn't understand them, and it became so chaotic. And as a result of God confusing the people, confusing the language that they were speaking, they could no longer proceed in building this tower. And as a result, what happened is that they started to spread across the earth. People who understood a little bit of each other's dialect or language, they kind of, grouped together and went away. And as a result, they got dispersed. Now, this group of people who thought that they would stay together, establish a name for themselves, and be high and mighty and be powerful about themselves, they were now broken down and they had to scatter across the face of the earth, and they could no longer do what they had intended to do. All right, our third question. What happened to the people after God confused their language? I think we probably discussed this in the prior question. Once people had their language confused, they no longer could stay in the same place because they couldn't understand everyone. The people who could understand each other, they decided to stay together, move together to some other place and be together. So as a result of God confusing their language, they started to spread out and go across the face of the earth. All right, so we're now going to discuss a couple of important questions. This is where we can learn from what wasn't pleasing, to the Lord about the people and why the Lord did what he did. So the first question is, why was God not pleased with the tower? Why was he not pleased with what, the people were doing when they attempted to build a name or build a tower that reached out to the skies and establish a name for themselves? You can go ahead, pause the video and think about what you would, imagine as the answer. And then once you're done, you can come back and join the video. Right, so one of the things that we can learn is that God was not happy about what was going on because people were being proud about themselves. We know from Scripture that God is the enemy of the proud. In a sense, God stands against the proud. He does not like pride or proud people to the extent that he stands in front of them and says, if you are proud, I am going to be your enemy. And I think that's what happened here when the people thought to themselves that we can do whatever we want to do now. We've got the strength, we've got the skill, we've got the language to communicate to one another. We can do whatever we want. They had a tremendous amount of confidence in their own self, in their own abilities. And that's what the Lord was not happy about. And when they started to do something like this, the Lord just couldn't, ignore it. He said, if you are proud in what you're able to do, I'm definitely going to be opposing you and stand against you. And that's, I think, what's the important lesson here. This tower was an effort where man was saying to himself, I can build a tower to the heaven. I can reach out to heaven on my own terms in my own way. And that is not how the Lord wants us to have a relationship with Him. He wants us to have a relationship that is purely dependent on God Himself. Realizing and accepting the fact that in us there is nothing that we can do on our own self. There is no confidence in our own flesh where we can do anything on our own and say, Lord, I can do it on my own. There's no way that we can do that. And the only way we can have a relationship, the only way we can have a beautiful living relationship is by depending on the Lord alone. And that's what the Lord brings out here as a lesson to us. If you think about it as a church, this would be a church that they try to build where they all wanted to do it themselves and wanted to do it their own way. And it wouldn't work because God was not with them. God was against them. Even though they had the skill and the language and everything they had to do or to build a church, God was against them. But on the other hand, the true church, which the Lord seeks to build, is a church where God is the head, where everyone is dependent on God and says, Lord, you alone can build this church. You alone can build a relationship with us where where we can have a relationship with you and where we can talk to you, hear from you, and live the life that you want us to live. You alone can make that happen in us. And that's I think one of the biggest takeaways that we can learn from this is to never be proud about ourselves and to always be dependent on God. And that leads us on to the last question. I probably repeated a little bit of that in the previous question. Again, what do we learn from the Tower of Babel? And the answer is that even though we may have a lot of strength in our own self, a lot of skills, a lot of abilities in our own self, if we can think that we can do it all by ourselves and do something for God and try to serve something or serve someone and bring glory to God in our own self and strength, it's going to be impossible. And that's the lesson that the Lord wanted to teach these people, that whatever we do, we have to do it in humility and in dependence on God. There are two verses which I wanted to bring out. One is in John 15:5. It says, without the Lord's help, we can do nothing. And another verse in Philippians 4:13, where it says, with Christ, I can do all things. And that's the fundamental takeaway for us, where we can learn and keep in our hearts that if God is with us, then there is nothing impossible for us to do. But if God is not with us, if He is against us, then there is nothing we can do. And when does He become against us? He becomes against us when we are proud in our own abilities or proud in our own strength. And that's, in my opinion, the biggest takeaway from this story, where we can learn from the failure of the people there who tried to build the Tower of Babel and seek God in humility and say, Lord, may it never be true of me, of anyone in my home, where we could become proud of ourselves, where we could become proud of a skill, a talent, a job, a grade, a degree or a college or a school or, skill in sport or anything that the Lord may have given us. we can pray that we will never be proud about it, but always recognize that it's something that the Lord has given. And if we want to use it for the Lord and glorify God in that, then we use it in a way where we are continually dependent on God, so that it'll bring glory to Him and honor to His name. So that's what I think we can learn from this story. And I just wanted to once again give credits to the resources I've been using for this story. All the images I've used are from freebibleimages.org. And the video that we just saw a short while ago is from Share Faith. And the biblical commentary I've been using in this story as well is from a book by Brother Zach called Through the Bible. It's a detailed book which explains every book in the Bible and explains a lot of things in those books in a way that we can easily understand, and also learn the relevance of every book in the Bible to our lives today. There's an audio and a video series to the book, which you can find in cfcindia.com. And it's been a tremendous resource that's helped me make out these videos. Thank you, and God bless you.